But we do our due diligence, we verify subs, right? We verify the sub license, and make sure everybody's got the trade license, moving permit, right? Because that's what county sometimes happens, right? You know, people aren't, subs are just saying, giving you a number out here, right? So that is something that happens, but there's, again, refinancing down the road, buy-in process and get a new loan. But getting more funds on the existing loan, not to say exhausted, no, I already come up with our contract. You guys need to figure it out. Or good work. Good question, though. And I'm gonna do some more research on my list. Anybody in post over here?
Question.
Yes.
You talked about it was severely bad and they, got in the house, more work, than they thought it was in the original bid of whatever some dollar amount. And you like said, it's bad, it falls on the inspector, it falls on the contract, so
Whether we know it.
is the contractor responsible to say do work right or what happens?
So the contractor, so
Eligible.
yeah, not lawyer, right? So if the contract,
Taken off their public record. We all know somebody. And many times, people don't share that, even with their closest friends and their family. They got a record down. So what I ask all of us to do, myself included, every time I get into a group or a session, I'm around someone, I just casually inject the issue of expungement into the conversation. And I let people know that if there's a conviction out there somewhere that people are ashamed to admit, or just don't want anybody to know, there's a way to not get rid of it, but to keep the public from having knowledge of it. That's what the expungement is all about. So when you're with your neighbors, when you're with your friends, when you go to a Halloween party this in a couple of weeks, a week or so, just drop that news and let them know the Detroit branch of NAACP offers free services to help people get their record expunged. Now, those of you who came in today, you got a handout that sets forth the general criteria for qualifying for an expungement. You don't have to have this handout, because all you have to do is contact the NAACP at Legal Redress and at the Detroit NAACP.org. We will then provide staff to review your record and determine whether you're eligible for an expungement. If so, then we will take the necessary steps to get your application filed, to secure your record, the prints, etc. To go through all the steps that are necessary to make sure that you have a proper hearing before a judge. Now, some convictions are now automatically expunged as a result of the new law that went into effect. But we're finding that even though they're automatically expunged, sometimes they still somehow creep out and show up on a record. We help you with that too. Keep that in mind as you listen to our panelists talk today. But let me tell you what, in general, the criteria is for an expungement. First of all, 3 years must have passed since the completion of the sentence or probation for any misdemeanor, with the exception, of course, of what's called a serious misdemeanor. Now, one of the things I'm telling you this, but you really need to come into the office if you have the need for the services and talk to us about, well, what is a serious misdemeanor? What is a misdemeanor? If it's a felony or a serious misdemeanor, then you gotta wait 5 years from the end of your sentence or probation. That's for one felony or as many serious misdemeanors as you have. If it is up to 3 felonies, in other words, if you got 3 felonies on your record, you have to wait 7 years from the end of your sentence, having served the sentence, and or having served the probation. Now, the reason, again, why I invite you to the office is because there are instances where 3 felonies can be considered as 1 felony. And I won't go into all of the details about that right now. Because I want you to. But that's the reason that it's important to contact the office and get the process started. And again, I emphasize that entire process is available to everyone without expense to you, without a lawyer's fee being charged to you. You take it from start to finish. There's some convictions that cannot be expunged. And I won't go into detail as to those this morning. Because again, you should understand that we're here to help you. So with that in mind, let's get right to our program this morning. As I indicated, we've got a very, very good program for this morning. We at the Detroit branch of NAACP, we divide our operations into sections, and we have committees, and those committees then as the basis for whatever, everything that we do. Last week, you may have recalled that I introduced you to our legal redress committee, which is really the committee that operates the George W. Crockett Community Law School. Well, in addition to our legal redress committee, we also have a criminal justice committee. And just as the name implies, they look at criminal matters in order to ensure that justice be done. And for each of our committees, we have a chairperson. We're fortunate this morning to have our criminal justice chair with us. When I ask him to come forward, and he is Attorney Dorian Titus, who will be introducing the panelists that will be speaking with you this morning.
Everyone, Dorian Titus, Chair of the Criminal Justice Committee, is pleasure to be here. If our panelists can join us on the stage. Let's see, test. Okay, so today we have a really dynamic topic here as we talk about some things that impact families and friends and individuals specifically as it relates to the criminal justice system. In this case, the Michigan Department of Corrections. So this panel discussion, the topic here is going to be navigating the Michigan Department of Corrections. And I have a panel here of esteemed folks that are distinguished in their respective space, and I'm going to read their bios and we will jump into the discussion. I'm going to start off first, ladies first. I'm going to start off with Ms. Beverly Smith. Ms. Smith is the Assistant Deputy Director with the Michigan Department of Corrections. She oversees the Metropolitan Territory, which consists of 9 counties. Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, the 3 largest counties in the state of Michigan, as well as Livingston, Lenawee, Monroe, Washtenaw, Hillsdale, and Jackson counties. Ms. Smith began her career with the Michigan Department of Corrections Field Operations Administration in 1987 as a probation agent with the Court Services Unit in Wayne County. She advanced steadily in her career, holding positions in various FOA offices and working briefly at Huron Valley Women's Facility as the Deputy Warden of Housing. There, she developed and renewed passion for trauma-informed principles. Beverly Smith believes in servant leadership, mentoring, and team building. She encourages diversity of thought and actively seeks a culture of trust. Beverly Smith has received various awards and certificates throughout her career with the Michigan Department of Corrections, most notably the Director's Award for Professional Excellence. Ms. Smith is currently working with experts to implement a coaching model designed to transform the way offenders are supervised utilizing effective cognitive behavior change techniques. Ms. Smith holds a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice with a minor in psychology from Wayne State University. Going from my left to right, we also have Mr. Darrell Woods Sr. Mr. Woods has a long bio. I'm going to trunk it a little bit. He's a very distinguished brother. Appreciate what he does. Since his welcome back to the streets and suites of Detroit, Darrell has kept his promise to prove that with God, all things are possible. He has led thousands of young people and parolees to transformation through his Restart Youth Deterrent and Prison Deterrent programs, where he worked tirelessly to close both the school to prison pipeline and reduce recidivism. He also expressed his passion for civil rights and social justice through his role as president of the NAACP prison branch at Ryan Correctional Facility. After serving 21 years behind prison walls, being denied by every court in the land and 3 failed commutation attempts, God said enough. With the backing of countless pastors, judges, professors, and community leaders, on the last day of the legislative calendar, Mr. Wood's sentence was commuted by Governor Rick Snyder on February 12, 2019, and he returned home. Now, in the same spirit of service and love, he is continuing his work of impacting the lives of others through a message of hope and transformation. He's the founder of Fighting the Good Fight, an entrepreneurial endeavor where advocates for criminal justice reform and helps to bring resources to the community through various partnerships and programs. He's also a member of the State Appellate Defenders Commission, where he was appointed to a 4-year term by Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and a member of the Substance Use Disorder Oversight Policy Board for Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. Finally, but not least, Brother Kenneth Nixon is an exoneree from Michigan. He spent 15 years and 9 months in prison for a crime that he did not commit. He was convicted of 2 counts of felony murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of arson. He was sentenced to 2 natural life terms plus 40 to 60 years in prison. He was exonerated on February 18, 2021. Since coming home, he has become a fierce advocate for criminal justice reform and has taken on issues such as reentry services, vital documents, bank accounts, and housing. He is currently the chairman of the Organization of Exonerees, an organization that he helped co-found and start from the ground up. OOE, Organization of Exonerees, is a group of dedicated men and women primarily from Michigan that are using their collective voices and their platform to directly address systematic injustices. They support the creation of conviction integrity units and stand up against innocent people being incarcerated for crimes they did not commit. Kenneth is also the Director of Outreach and Community Engagement at Safe and Just Michigan. This organization believes that Michigan can have safer communities with less incarceration. Their work is dedicated to addressing legislative and policy reforms that are restrictive and outdated. Punishment in prison should not be the answer to all of society's problems. And with that, can we give all of our panelists a round of applause? At this time, we're going to play a quick video here to set our conversation.
That's great.
I was just getting the heat out. Yeah.
20 years, 8 months, 10 days, in that money.
Before I was wrongfully convicted, I was a young father. My daughter was 2.5.
I went to school for professional carpentry, started out, became licensed in that.
My first year of college at Central Michigan University, way up in Mount Pleasant, did great, everything.
I wonder why.
I wasn't a model citizen, if you will. I mean, I, did commit a little crime, nothing significant that would land me in prison for the rest of my life.
My mom was kind of sick, so I moved back, was doing real estate, school, it was pretty good, life was pretty good.
I was mostly confused. I was not, what was happening. I was getting confused about me being charged for something I didn't do.
When you've been wrongfully convicted, you lose everything. You lose relationships, you lose family, you lose friends.
You're getting somewhere that you don't want to be against your will, that you shouldn't be in the first place. It's basically the same thing as being kidnapped. You're screaming to the top of your lungs and telling anyone that will listen to you that you want to go home.
And usually the last thing that you hold on to is hope.
We travel the country doing advocacy work. That advocacy looks different with each situation.
I traveled down to St. Louis with Mr. Nixon and Mr. Cotton and a few others to be a presence in the courtroom where there's a man being considered for release.
The courtroom can be one of the longest places in the world for an individual who has been wrongfully convicted. And it's important that when you look behind you and see the organization, the exonerees, all of us can have t-shirts, you know that we are there for you. It's important to balance the scales of justice because we got resources.
When someone is released, we're at the prison to receive them. We want our faces along with their family to be some of the first faces they see.
If the organization of exonerees wasn't at the jail, family members who are maybe not, doing the right thing, or friends who may be into whatever, or associates could have been at the jail, but they influence me in a different way. But because they're always ahead of the curve, that exoneree doesn't even have to face that scenario.
You're grateful when you get out of prison, of course, but a lot of us, we spent so much time in prison, our families are dead. We don't have nowhere to go.
It's hard enough being free, losing mom or brother or sister, but while incarcerated, you can't be around your family. I mean, it's torture.
The hardest adjustment of being out was trying to find a place on my own because people who rented apartments and houses didn't like renting to felons.
I was at a homeless shelter until I was able to move in with a couple that was kind enough to take me in exchange for housekeeping.
When I came out, I was all alone. I did not have a support system of family around me. The president of the organization, Ken Nixon, extended his hand and all his knowledge base that he had.
I didn't have a social security card, birth certificate, driver's license, any of that.
So one of the first things that we set out to do was simplify that process as much as possible. That began with identifying who was responsible for those roles. If I spent a decade and a half in prison for a crime that I did not commit, why is it that I have to reprove to the government I'm the person that you had in custody for that amount of time?
So I went through the organization of exonerees, they hooked me up. I was able to walk right into the clerk's office, get my birth certificate. I didn't have to wait on the list.
It's like a judge-free zone. No, we're not gonna judge one another. We're just gonna help and support one another in whatever we don't do in a positive way.
It even helped me setting up bank accounts, getting my driver's license.
Provided me a bunch of suits and clothes. All of that was under the umbrella of the organization of exonerees.
We've got men and women in this organization that'll never be whole mentally. We've got men and women in this organization that weren't whole when they went into the prison system. And for lack of resources and for lack of accountability within the system, they came out worse than they were when they went in.
When I first got out, I didn't sleep for 8 days. I didn't sleep until my body shut down and made me sleep.
Is this really happening or is this a dream? Because a lot of times I was in prison
I had dreams that I was out, and when I woke up, I was still laying on that bunk.
I was very, very, very close with all of my nephews and nieces. However, I was gone for almost 5 years out of their lives. They outgrew me, you know.
They say, let it go, bro. That's in the past. How can you let something go that becomes part of you?
You know, I'm going through a lot of mental and physical and emotional trauma. By me being a part of the organization of designeries and dealing with the CIU, I was able to go on retreats, and the retreats was able to let me bring into the light of what really is my trauma. Unlike the little brothers, you know, they keep an eye on me.
The organization of retirees allows us that space to be able to be a brother, sister, a comrade, or a therapist.
You feel lost because you don't know what's gonna happen. We start from scratch. We babies. We don't have underwear, socks. We not even fuck with a car, apartment. You know what I mean? Like a lot of us been gone for so long that the world is different. Technology is different. My first day out, somebody gave me a menu. I looked at this thing and didn't know what to do. Because I've been served food for 34 years. When the waiter said, so what side would you want with this? I said, what side do you need, the left or the right? I didn't know what side was. You know, just shopping for groceries. I still don't know how to shop for groceries. Because it's just something different. I can get a bit overwhelming. Just imagine being on a station. It's a world inside the world. And you got kids, 5 years old, on the phone back to you. That's sad. So I mean, we was lost in the sauce. You gotta learn about insurance, you gotta learn about taxes, you gotta learn about banks, you gotta learn about mortgage rates, interest rates, buying a car.
And it was like everybody was trying to get me to learn all these things in such a short time. And that was so frustrating for me.
In a year and a half after I was released, I was still being rejected for jobs because of false conviction. The fact that I was proven innocent, yeah, that's good for the heart, warms the soul. But in reality, there's a lot more that needs to be done.
So we educate people on top of helping people get justice, shining a light on ones that don't have a voice, with a voice for others. I believe in paying it forward. I'm sure us being out here, somebody in a band paid it forward to us being here, speaking of Valley. Yeah, without her, I don't think this day would exist at all.
Since I've been out of prison, I've just been trying to advance the mission of helping innocent people get out of prison and advocate and do all the things that I dreamed about when I was sitting in that prison cell.
I've been doing backpacks for the kids, free food giveaways, giving back to the less fortunate. Because at one point in time, I was the less fortunate.
I found that hope within so many others who looked beyond the blue and orange uniform that we wore and saw our humanity and understands the pain and suffering that has taken place. That gives me a lot of confidence to say that if they can believe in me, I can definitely believe in myself.
I see myself being an awesome dad. I'm already a business owner. I've just been putting everything in place. I have a trucking company. I'm gonna drop my book through my media company. So now I'm just gonna build and build and build, and eventually I'm gonna look up, I'm gonna be there. Ultimately, I like to own a restaurant. Food is a passion of mine. I love to cook. I love to please people. Food is like art. You make it come to life. I'm gonna have some kids, and I'm gonna live real, just at peace. I mean, I just want to be at peace.
Powerful video with first person testimonies as it relates to navigating some of the difficulties within the correction system. And so with that being said, in that laying of framework, the first thing I'd like to say in terms of just a question to the panel, and actually I'll start with Mr. Nixon. You know, from the video, wrongful conviction can have a significant impact on the individual's physical and mental health. What are some resources that us as community members or individuals specifically within the corrections facilities can utilize to help support their loved ones in the prison system?
Just being a voice sometimes is more meaningful than most people realize. I know there's a misconception that when you're inside, people complain just for the sake of complaining. Right? But the reality is oftentimes healthcare can be inadequate. Right? They may not always understand your ailments at the time. So, what the short temporary fix or whatever medication they give you to deal with it for today may not suffice that pain over a long period of time. Or something that may require surgery, they may not be so quick to perform that procedure on the inside, right? But advocates in society pressing the issue, making phone calls and really trying to get the administration to understand that this is a serious issue can be a game changer for somebody on the inside. Because when you're in there, you can be screaming at the wall mostly. Like people hear you, but they're not listening to you because it's such a factor of process, right? Process. So get you in, get you out is typically the healthcare response, but that's not always the answer to everybody. It's typically not an individualized process on the inside. So family members and community being able to be a voice to that person or a voice to that sickness or that illness could be a difference maker, right? When COVID hit the prisons, it was pushed away. Staff didn't recognize it as a serious issue as it was. But it took for the community to get involved before they started to open their eyes and realize that this was a really big problem. So had it not been for that outside voice, it could have been worse. Society, community, advocates, people in the space of just having a loved one or caring about people. The one thing that's severely lacking on the inside is love. It's not a lot of it. So for the people that do have access to it, that voice adds an additional point of interest for the staff and for the person themselves.
Anyone else have any comments that they want to add to that? No, okay.
I will add to it. I would say that it's vitally important that family members be in tune with what's going on with their loved one on the inside. One of the things that they could be able to do is to get a medical power of attorney. If they get a medical power of attorney, then they can call the healthcare staff and talk to any psychologist or whatever to be able to advocate on behalf of their loved ones. And it's vitally important that they do that, because sometimes the person who is incarcerated is ignored. Just recently in the Michigan Department of Corrections up north, a warden and some of his staff members was charged with involuntary manslaughter because they had someone chained in the cell, and then they didn't pay attention to that. Had the loved one had that medical power of attorney, was able to advocate on behalf of their loved one, that may have been different. I don't know where the charges are right now, but at best, something went terribly wrong. And this has happened, this is not the first time that happened, where people who died, who had mental illness inside the prison, left to die in their own squalor, and so it's going to take organizations like the NAACP, the ACLU, and other organizations to make sure that there are policies in place that something like that would never, ever happen again.
I'm glad you brought that up in terms of medical power of attorney, which is a document that family members can execute with the permission of the individual to be able to get access to medical records and make decisions on their behalf. So it's definitely something that is very, very useful and helpful. I'd like to go to Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith, you work for the Michigan Department of Corrections. You've been working in this space for a long time. What efforts and improvements and things that are going on in the Michigan Department of Corrections that either we should know about or we should advocate for, as Mr. Nixon talked about specifically as it relates to legislation and improving conditions?
So when I started with the Department of Corrections, and it will be 36 years in November, Well, bless you. The mantra at that time, I think, was if you build them, they will come. And Michigan was building prisons and we were housing people. And we got to the point where at one point, 51,000 people were in Michigan Department of Corrections prisons. We recognized that, thank God, that was not the way to handle crime. And as a result, we have offender success now. It's the office where we do reentry services. Our prison commitment rate has gone down. We're at like 31,000, just over a little 31,000 people in prison at this time, and 10% of those are not eligible for parole. So we do have the parole board who is actually looking to see who is currently in prison. Can they be released on parole? And if so, what can we do in those situations? So of course, there were times when we opened the prison doors and we said, you know, see you later. And that was some people had those conversations, which is not the case, I believe now. One of the reasons why I'm still with Department of Corrections is because I do see a change. I do see the fact that we now have Office of Offender Success, where we have reentry services, where we actually go into the prison, speak to the person before they're released and say, what are your needs? So if there's needs, it's housing, if the need is jobs, if the need is substance use disorders, then these are things that we're working at doing before they're even released, before you open the doors, because even hearing the video with recognizing that once the person is released, after spending so many years in prison, it's like people are lost. You know, you don't know how to use a cell phone. Standing in a grocery store can be something that's traumatic. So now we are teaching our officers about coaching method versus referee. Referee is what you stand on the sidelines, you wait for somebody to mess up, you blow the whistle, you put them back in prison. Now the coaching method is one where we're actually asking our staff to treat your probationers and or your parolees as if they are part of your team. And what is it that you can do to help? So the recidivism rate back about 10 years ago was probably about 55. Now it's 22. So that means we have a 79% success rate. And we're looking to be more successful because we don't want now, and I say we, and I am speaking for Department of Corrections, but I also will speak for myself personally. I would like for people who have their first contact with Department of Corrections to be their last contact. And so I've had conversations with Mr. Woods and with others that will listen to say we have a probation population in Wayne County of 9,000 probationers. There's about 1,500 parolees in Wayne County. Do the math. 9,000 people is who you want to have that contact with and who you want to have that impact with. So when you have 9,000 probationers, and these are people who have not gone to prison, you want to have those contacts with people and give them what they need while they're still in the community so that they don't have to go to prison.
Brought up a couple of different terms, and I'm not sure if everyone in the audience, just for me, specifically, everyone knows kind of what the process looks like. You brought up like the parole board and the reentry services. What is that in terms of a timeline so folks get an idea of what that looks like?
So if a person is convicted of a crime in Wayne County, depending on what the crime is, they could be placed on probation and or go to prison. They're placed on probation. They are under the jurisdiction of the court, in this case, Wayne County Court, Third Circuit. They would have a probation officer. That probation officer would have special conditions that are listed by the judge, by the court, to say this is what you need to do in order to get off probation. Probation officer's job at that point is to work with them, to give them what they need so that they leave better than how we found them. If they go to prison, and oftentimes there are situations where a person is placed on probation, they violate, probation. And so then they may be sentenced to prison. If that is the case, then they have to do a term of years, depending on what the judge sets as their sentence. And once they are eligible for parole, they will have to go before a parole board member. That parole board member will determine whether or not this is a person that they believe can be released into the community, and then they will have a parole agent that will supervise them. They also have special conditions. They also will have to complete those special conditions before it would be a request for them to be discharged from parole.
Thank you for that. As it relates to reentry services or support services when people are released, what are some of the support services or reentry services that are provided either by Michigan Department of Corrections or other organizations, outside organizations in the community that support that?
We've been working with Secretary of State's office now. This is something that was not happening before, so that when people are released from prison, they will have their ID, either a driver's license or a state ID that they can obtain. You know, when we talk about employment, you're not going to be employed without those vital documents. So vital documents are very important, and we're working at getting those vital documents to the person before they parole. We also work with housing, excuse me. And what we recognize is with substance abuse. You know, a lot of times we have, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of jumping all over the place, but things are coming to mind, but we have vocational village. Vocational village is trades that we have for people in certain prisons. We've got 3 prisons, Jackson, Iona, and now in the Huron Valley, that have a vocational village training academy. Once they are released from prison, because we recognize that you need a job, we recognize that you need education, we recognize that you need housing, employment. And so these are things that we have been working for to get those. And I'll let somebody else talk, because it seems like I've been talking for a minute.
You have organizations like Chance for Life, and I would definitely applaud Assistant Deputy Director Smith for her great leadership and for what she's doing in the space that she's in. But you have organizations like Chance for Life, you even have the organization of exonerees that help connect some of the ones who's been exonerated into resources. You have Here to Help Foundation with Bob Swartz, who help people when they first get out. Once you make a contact with them, he's going to bring you some gift cards. She's going to be able to connect you to some work clothes. Once you get a job and prove that you can, work and stable, help you get a vehicle, he'll help you get some first month rent for your apartment or your house without any strings attached. You got one of the best programs going on in terms of the Here to Help Foundation. And then, Fight a Good Fight also do connect a lot of people to services and resources, so definitely there are some programs there, and we need more. We need more funding. We need to be able to work as Director Smith was saying with them before they step out, like SATO do, the State Appellate Defender's Office, all the juvenile lifers, they contact all the juvenile lifers before they are released and see what their needs are. We'll pick them up from the prison and be able to get them where they need to be at. And we do that as the organization of exonerees as well. I'm also a founding member and helped create the organization of exonerees with Val Newman. And so that organization is blossoming and it's doing more to be able to help.
I definitely want to applaud Deputy Smith. When I went into the system in 2005, I went in during that 51,000. When I entered the system, prison was the answer for everything. You didn't want to go to school, they sent you to prison. You didn't want to take your meds, you went to prison. Like, prison was literally the answer for all societal problems. But you know, of course, with the help of her direction, I think the department's in a space where it's actually listening now, and they're delivering on what they hear. I agree 100% that, you know, when there was a time and a space where it was use a hammer for everything. That was literally every nail, every screw, every loose piece of wood got the hammer. And now they're at a place, you know, where they found the screwdriver, right? They found the glue. So, and it's a very important space to be in, because those resources that the people return into the community were lacking, were also the reason the recidivism rate was 55%, right? The department's at a space where they're asking what you need, as opposed to telling you what you need. And that's not all, telling people is not always the answer, right? We're going to tell you what we want you to do, as opposed to asking what you need to be successful. And I think in that space, it has been extremely helpful for a lot of folks. And they've also been inclusive, community partnerships, team wellness, you know, organizations with retirees, Nation Outside, organizations that are on the ground in the fight. You know, we're able to pass that message to Director Smith and say, hey, this person needs this, and she can deliver. But there was a time where that didn't exist. So I think, you know, very, very commendable leadership, and we've come a long way from where we were 20 years ago.
And as we talked about last week, dealing with fair chance housing, that is a barrier there, and it's really a crisis. And it's vitally important that we advocate for the fair chance housing bill that is presently in the State House right now, because if we do not change that dynamic, many men and women come out here, and you know, there are some stipends here and there for housing for them, but these are, you know, sometimes the options that they have are terrible, you know, and they have to fight, you know, in a situation, whether they're going to be around a drug infested situation or being around a situation that has mold. And so people are desperate coming out of here, out of prison, and coming back into the community. And they like Jesus Christ. There was no room in the end for them, you know, and there's no room in the end with these foul policies that deny people the right to be able to rent houses or apartments when they have the means to be able to do it. And you know, this is a crisis, and we need to push very, very hard that we change this policy. Marshall Fudge from Washington, D.C., she has declared that this is something, a priority of hers, and it should be a priority for us in the state of Michigan.
Just really briefly, Brother Woods, can you explain a little bit more about that bill, what that bill would actually do?
It will stop discriminating against those who want to rent an apartment or house. The city of Detroit passed a fair chance housing ordinance several years ago, and you know, it has helped. Do we need to strengthen it? Absolutely, but it has helped. So it gives people, you know, it's not a situation where it's going to cause danger or anything of that nature, but just saying that I served 20 years in prison, I come out, I get a job, I'm a taxpaying citizen, and now I want to rent a house, you know, or rent an apartment, but I'm being discriminated against. And then a lot of these places are getting federal dollars and subsidies to be able to build their places or to be able to maintain their places. And I do pay federal taxes, you know, so I should benefit from having the opportunity to stay in this place or that place without discrimination.
Yeah, that's good. One thing I do want to do, and I appreciate the panel at this point, is I want to open it up to the audience should they have any questions for our panelists related to this particular topic.
Yeah, I wanted to add talking about exonerees, and I think I commend Ken and Daryl, as well as Beverly, for what's going on with exonerees. I think it's long, long overdue. But we have, I'm wondering if you think there's room to expand your efforts, because we have a lot of people who are wrongfully convicted of misdemeanors. I know they serve 30 days in a county jail, or they do a probation. And I hear it all the time. We get the calls all the time about people saying, I'm innocent of what I was convicted of. They are often convicted without a jury. One question. Is there, do you think there's room to address that misdemeanor issue? Another question is, and this is simply the same, really, sort of, what are the qualifications for being, for qualifying for services as a exoneree? The last thing I want to mention is that you use the word recidivism that some people may not be familiar with. So you might want to talk about what that is.
Sorry, you're absolutely correct. So every state determines the recidivism rate based on whether or not a person who has been released from prison goes back to prison within 3 years. So our last cohort for recidivism rate was from 2019. And that's our number now, which is 22.1%, meaning 22% of the people who were released from prison have returned to prison within 3 years. Now, I'm going to stay within my lane as far as misdemeanors, so I will pass that on to.
To your question, absolutely, there's space for that to be addressed. In fact, I think I personally, along with a couple of the other exonerees, have started to speak about that ourselves, right? We typically hear about the murder convictions, the rape convictions, the armed robbery convictions. These are what are considered in the legal system capital crimes. So the severity of the punishment that come along with those crimes raise them to the level of priority in terms of what's most important to address. However, yes, I am 100% aware that there are a lot of lesser crimes that have an effect on people's lives. There's absolutely space for that. I think that it's going to take people to care about that issue before it can be addressed. In society, those are things that we don't hear about, right? We don't typically hear about the paper crimes or the person that pled guilty just to get out of prison so they didn't lose your house on Monday, or they pled guilty to get out of jail in time to make sure their kids got to school and didn't get expelled because they missed too many days. Those are real scenarios, 100%. I think it's going to take the legal community to come together to address that space, because when you look at things like organizations such as the Innocence Project, right? The Innocence Project, the amount of time that it takes from application to actually being retained and sometimes exonerated, it can be several years. And their priority is people that are incarcerated, people that could potentially die in a very violent environment. Someone that's free doesn't have that same priority. They're moved down the list, very far down the list, because of the circumstances surrounding someone on death row or with a life sentence, or their circumstances are totally different. So I think the legal community itself is probably in the best space to address this. However, it's going to take a huge effort. And I think people like me, you, Daryl, speaking to this consistently out into the community is what's going to have to wake people up to it. This is one of those issues that the community sleeps on because nobody really thinks about it, right? Nobody really thinks about it until that person can't get a job or can't get fair housing or can't get, a fair opportunity to be a citizen. Right? That's what's happening here. People are being discriminated against because of their criminal records, when in reality, not all of those criminal records are accurate, which is part of what's being argued with fair chance housing. You shouldn't be discriminated because you don't understand the circumstances around that conviction to begin with. So that shouldn't exclude a person from being able to live somewhere in safe space or be able to have gainful employment. Employment should be based on a person's ability to do the job, not based off of a 20-year-old record. This is something that has consistently created a problem, but we bring a voice to that in spaces where we've traditionally been locked out of or had an opportunity to speak to that problem. But now, luckily for us, we're around leaders, we're in a space that is open to hearing that. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, there is space to grow there. I don't know what that looks like currently, but I think it's going to take a big conversation from the legal community, organizations like the NAACP, the Organization of Exonerees, Nation Outside, Michigan Department of Corrections, Fighting a Good Fight. People that, one, have lived experience should be at that table. Two, people that have been discriminated against because of this. You heard Gilbert say it on the film, where even though he was exonerated, he still couldn't get a job a year and a half later. There's a misconception that comes with the system itself as a whole. Just because exoneree is attached to my name doesn't mean the system made me whole when they let me go. I still have to go through an entire expungement process. So those same discriminations that everyone else faced as a parolee or probationer, we face those same things. So we had to learn to navigate those systems just like everybody else. There is room for improvement, absolutely, and we need to be addressing those lesser crimes.
And I would say this, Prosecutor Worthy just recently worked with the Attorney General to create a jobs court. And so those who have felony convictions and misdemeanor convictions or who are being litigated even right now, they can be able to be a part of the job court and have their case dismissed. You know, and a lot of lawyers do not know about this particular program, and we need to make sure that lawyers are very much aware of this program so that people can take advantage of it. You know, they have employers, top-notch employers who will employ them and be able to help them get the skills. And if they don't have food, they can help them get food and all those type of things. And so this is a program that they have going on right now. And then also there's a number of people. I've talked with the director of probation at 36th District Court, Right Way. There are a number of people who are now really you know, on a run for misdemeanors, for even some felonies, who can have their cases, they can get into a program and have their cases adjudicated and they can get their cases dismissed. But there are currently thousands of warrants out. It's going to take the faith-based community, it's going to take the NAACP and a number of organizations to get this messaging to the people so that they can clear their records up. You know, so definitely is certainly room far as from the conviction integrity unit aspect and from the organization exonerees. Absolutely, our highest priority is for those who are condemned to die in there and those who have decades, sentenced to decades, and they are actually innocent of these crimes. To be able to get them out of that situation is a high priority. There are probably about 1,500 cases on the Wayne County Conviction Integrity Unit desk right now. And we encourage lawyers and organizations to work with them to be able to reduce that power. And that's just in the state, that's just in Wayne County, but you look at Oakland County, Washington County, and all these other counties where people have filed petitions, you know, so the work is there and we need the bodies.
Excellent. We have another question up front.
Yes. My name is Leon, and definitely I love the work that Organization Exoneree does here in Michigan. And I wanted to ask the Deputy Commissioner, Ms. Smith, and this question is for the members and chair of Organization Exoneree as well. Do you think that with the work that the Organization Exoneree is doing on behalf of innocent people, is actually opening up the door for other aspects of prison reform?
I would like to, I would like to believe that, even before, the work that they're doing for exonerees, that Michigan Department of Corrections recognized, that housing human beings was not the best practice. And, we, I believe, have done a lot, like Mr. Nixon was saying, I believe we've come a long way in our beliefs. There was a time in corrections where not only did we not speak to outside agencies, we didn't speak to one another. So field operations is where I'm over, and then there was CFA, correctional facilities. We did not have conversations, communication as we should. You have one individual, that person may have been on probation. Once they violated probation and it was determined by the court that they were going to go to prison, it started as if they were
Uh, he was a governor who knew not God, in my opinion, you know, because this guy built all these prisons and was about mass incarceration. That philosophy has changed. Even when Granholm took office, she was able to create the Parole and Commutation Board, in which I strongly urge this governor and as well as this department to take on the Parole and Commutation Board. Governor Granholm commuted more sentences than any governor in history, next to Milligan. Thank God I'm a benefactor of a commutation, but there are, you know, a lot of things that can be done to be able to even reduce the population even more. You got people who are mentally ill. You got people who are there elderly and medically frail that could be out of the system. And it's costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars for per individual to house them in the department. And so Senator, who is that senator? One of the senators I'm on a committee with right now, not Chain, but Geis. She has a parole and medically frail bill that she's about to drop very, very soon, something the NAACP can take a look at. I have stacks of files of people who've been in there under the old felony murder law, been in there 50 years. And the old felony murder law was abolished in 1980, but wasn't made retroactive. And so you got men and women in prison languishing in there, over 100 of them still there. This was one of the signature issues of Reverend Wendell Anthony when he came in as president of Detroit branch NAACP, to fight for those lives of those who were condemned under a law that was abolished. And so there's a lot more to look at, you know. Yes, thank God for Assistant Deputy Director Smith, but I think, you know, that, you know, we do need to have reconvene again and make sure that the director is here and present with the NAACP to answer some of the questions from the people, because that's vitally important, and that shows good leadership and show respect of the NAACP and organizations throughout, you know. So there's a lot more I could say to that, but I ended on that note.
I would just also like to say that there was a time where mental health facilities were closed down, and Department of Corrections became the mental health facility. And that should never have been the case. Yes.
I think the work, to your point, I think the work that
not just the organization of exonerees, but all of us community leaders that have been justice impacted. I think we've shaped the way that the MDOC thinks about reentry, because it's hard to, one, look at an exoneree and say the system doesn't need changing, right? But for one thing that we realized in our beginning stages of advocacy is that our plight wasn't just our own, right? Every person that came out of prison and back into the community was facing the same challenges and hurdles that we did, except we had a platform to say it, right? That every parolee sounds like every parolee, but we're in a different space because we didn't do anything to belong there to begin with, let alone be restricted from services because of this ill that was thrust upon us to begin with, right? So because we had that platform, we were able to speak to those injustices, but not only speak from a personal space. I can speak to things that I saw. I can speak to things that I experienced. I can speak to things that I touched, heard, felt while inside. So that's a different space, but being able to have that platform and have the ability to talk to leadership, to talk to, the agencies that handle these reentry services, and being able to have that open dialogue and know they're listening to you. Yes, to some degree, I think all of us community leaders, not just the organization of exonerees, all of us community leaders that have been justice impacted, that have the ability to speak to that problem, has played some role in where we are today.
I think it's on. Hi, good morning. Moderating the chat on Zoom. And one of the questions, and you guys started to speak about this a little bit, but they asked, could you elaborate more on some of the challenges that faces those who are released from prison finding employment?
There are a lot of employers that still are discriminatory when it comes to criminal records. I'm personally I know as Daryl is, we speak directly to that issue when we speak to business leaders, because the punishment should fit the crime, right? We all agree that, if you've got a financial crime, you shouldn't be dealing in the financial industry. If you've got a pharmaceutical crime, you shouldn't be dealing in the pharmaceutical industry. We all agree to that. That's a no-brainer. But a 20-year-old gun charge has nothing to do with your ability to drive a lawnmower in a straight line. A 20-year-old gun charge has nothing to do with your ability to perform CPR when somebody's dying. These are the punishment for those crimes does not fit today's narrative, right? Something that does not affect your ability to perform your job duties shouldn't restrict you from being able to perform your job duties. There's people that go to school for decades to earn degrees and certificates in a certain profession, only to catch a misdemeanor and be excluded from that profession because of it. There's industries that have blanket statements. Any misdemeanor, any felony could restrict you from employment in that profession for anywhere from 1 to 10 years. When you think about that, jaywalking is a misdemeanor. Driving on a suspended license is a misdemeanor. You could ruin your whole career for stepping off the curb too soon. That makes no sense when we live in a space where we're at now, where everywhere you look, there's a now hiring sign. There's not an industry in this country that's not suffering from the lack of employment, but yet we have restrictive barriers that did not affect the person's ability to perform their job duties. That's a conversation that we need to have as human beings, not as advocates, not as leaders, not as directors of anything. That's a human issue. People are being restricted based off of things that have nothing to do with their abilities to perform the job.
I think that the city of Detroit, they hire for bus drivers, they hire for the towing for the Detroit Police Department. You can be a returning citizen. I know people who served 10, 20 years who are working for the Detroit Police Department towing program. You can, even on a bipartisan basis, they all agree that people who are returning back to the community
are some of the best workers that they can hire. You know, even from Richard DeVos all the way to Mike Duggan would say hire returning citizens. They write op-eds. Now we need to continue to advocate for this even more with more employers. I know major corporations who have hired returning citizens. But I want to see the Michigan Department of Corrections hire more returning citizens. You know, back in the day, they had a policy where people can come in and work as correction officers and things of that nature. People rose up to the ranks of deputy warden. You know, I think that should be the case. I think there should be a returning citizen on the Michigan parole board. You know, the main thing that we need to challenge for returning citizens is the housing situation. It is a housing crisis. That's one of the biggest crises that we have, and certainly continue to advocate for more job opportunities for them as well. You know, but there are some changes happening in terms of the workforce, you know, but housing is a crisis, and I'll let Deputy Director.
I'd like to speak to the employment situation as well. So MDOC has now hired recovery coaches. And we are hiring mentors, or we have mentors, I should say, not hiring mentors, people with felony convictions. So
we want them to hire them.
I understand. I understand. As far as employment is concerned, MDOC, we actually hold our own job fairs.
Yeah.
So we have different agencies who are considered felon-friendly agencies. They will come to job fairs. We set those up, and then we invite our parolees and our probationers to come to job fairs. We've gotten people who were hired right there on site for job fairs that we've held. Also, we have Vocational Village. I spoke about that earlier, where we have Jackson, Ionia, and Women's Huron Valley. So Vocational Village is where we actually teach trades while they're in the prison. We've had employers actually come into the prison, interview people, and give them a job. So once they leave prison, they will have employment. So these are things, we've got over 40 vocational technical things that we're training in the prisons. You would ask me about Huron Valley because I have not toured Huron Valley. They're going to have a tour. I believe it's November 6th that I do plan on attending. So I don't remember, I don't have a card with me, and I don't actually remember what their vocations are, but I know in the other facilities, it's carpentry, it's electrical, it's plumbing. It's car mechanics. We've actually had a person that left the prison with like 8 master's certificates in car mechanics. Yes, so these are things and it came about as a result of the unions and employers coming to Michigan Department of Corrections and saying people have spent their 30 years or worked for 30 years and they're now retiring, and we don't have the workforce that we need. And that's how Vocational Village came about. For women, I think one is horticulture, maybe, but I don't want to misspeak. So I think it'd be better for me, Ms. Moore, just to send you an email and let you know, and maybe you could put the blast out on your website of what they have.
Particularly in the prison system, we get calls frequently about, I got a call from my son's friend, and he's having some medical issues. How can we direct those people to the warden to contact their family members? I think there's truly a breakdown in communication as far as within the system.
Well, there are prison counselors that have what they're developing now as a caseload. Caseloads are usually something that happened in the field. With field agents, we would have a caseload of certain number of probationers and or parolees. Now they're going to do the same thing in the prison. So a prison counselor would have a caseload that the person in the prison, the prisoner, would know who their prison counselor is and that information, and they could provide that to their family members. They need that advocacy from the outside.
And also, I would say, again, it's vitally important that everyone that's incarcerated that has a loved one, that they go to healthcare, have them direct them to healthcare to do a medical power of attorney, and so that they loved one can be able to call personally on their issues. Then you also have the legislative ombudsman office. Keith Barber is still there as the legislative ombudsman. And so I would direct them to his office as well, because he advocates and check into things on behalf of the legislature, on behalf of family members of who have people who loved ones of incarcerated people, so I would say that.
We're going to take our last question here.
Good morning, panel. My question is, for a person coming home from prison for the first time, how should family members help ease that transition? What shouldn't they do?
You shouldn't be telling someone what you think they should be doing. That's the start. Like, no one coming from prison wants to be told what to do or be put in a restrictive space. For so long, being inside that, you develop that mentality that you're being told what to do. You don't want to be released and still be told what to do. I think it's incredibly important that family members and the community be mindful of the language that we use when we are talking to people from prison, because prison is such a direct space, right? And as men, you're in an environment full of men. So we can be very direct and upfront when we say things, because we've learned to address it in a very extreme way sometimes. So being mindful of the way you say things could be a huge help for that person making a transition. But as far as like monetary things or material things, just helping that person learn themselves. For example, you don't know what size clothes you wear when you're released from prison. They don't use sizes inside. Everything is elastic. So you don't know whether you wear 34 or 36. So that's something that people in society don't typically understand, because it's not something that's widely talked about. So people always ask you, well, what size clothes do you wear? Well, I don't know. I haven't used sizes in 10 years. So that's something, being patient with that person as they learn to navigate that process and not forceful, is something that is hugely important, but also just offering help in a different kind of way. When people return from society, the community has a tendency to think that you recognize everything the same way that you have, right? 10, 20 years of technology. That person doesn't know anything about an iPhone or an Android or how to use the radio in a car. All of this is new to some people. But because you know it, because you grew up with it, because you've been around it majority of your life, the assumption is that that person should just pick up and get it. It's not always that easy for everybody. So just being patient with the person and allowing them that space to grow without being forceful or using words that could be received as forceful is a huge help.
Thank you.
I would like for family members to recognize that the parole agent is actually there to help and not someone who's looking to figure out a way to send the person back to prison, and reach out to our staff so that they can, have those wraparound services and be able to hear from everyone.
Absolutely.
That's vitally important, just demonstrating love and support and encouragement. If you have any information in terms of trying to help them set up a bank account or, some of those other necessities that they need, have a care package for them when they get there, ask them what kind of, deodorant. And they know what size drawers they wear, you know what I'm saying? You get them some drawers or I would say underwear, because and some t-shirts and stuff, because they know they get extra large t-shirts or whatever, large or whatever, but just being patient with them and just demonstrating that love, that encouragement and support. And you ain't got to baby them either, because you want to encourage them, want to enable them. Folks get out, they got to be responsible, identifying places who will hire felony friendly, that's felony friendly, have, maybe develop a list for that. If you have time, because when you get parole, you got about a couple of months before you get out anyway, and so that loved one working hand in hand with that person. And if you can go pick them up from the prison, that would be a good thing, so all of that matter. Absolutely.
Quick question. This one is for Ms. Smith. I have the privilege of serving as the general counsel for the Detroit branch in NAACP. And in that position, I've gotten more than one call from people who are returning citizens and from people who are employees of the Department of Corrections. It seems that the Department of Corrections has a rule that says its employee cannot associate with a person with a criminal record.
The Department of Corrections did have a rule that said that.
That's
That
what-
is one of the things that we have heard from other people and have changed. So yes, we do have, there was indeed a policy that said you cannot have, if you're a felon, you can't have contact with other felons. That is no longer the case.
Well, I just wanted to highlight it because we've been talking about housing. And we got the call about an employee who wanted to offer housing to their relative, but they worked for the department and therefore couldn't have a felony conviction in their household. So you're saying that's gone?
No, that's totally different. So I think there is a work rule for Department of Corrections, Work Rule 50, that indicates you can't have contact with someone that has a felony conviction as an employee unless you basically ask permission. And so people who are immediate family members, that's just an email, that would be an email to me. But there is so that particular case, I would have to get all of the details, because I believe in that situation, if there is an employee that, or a person that works for a Department of Corrections and they have a family member who is a convicted felon, that they want to rent a room to or a house to, I don't believe there is a rule that says that cannot happen. So there may be some different, nuances that's going on in that situation that we would have to talk about.
So we're gonna have to ring your phone.
Okay, I'm gonna give you my number.
All right, thank you, Darren.
I just want to give the panelists an opportunity to close out. They have any last words or things that they want to say?
I personally want to thank Director Smith for all the work that she's done in her leadership role. I think we've come a far, far away from where we used to be, not only in the space of exonerees, just in reentry period. I think the direction that you've taken the department out in the field is very respectable. Just being able to allow people to have that opportunity to, now your parole agent is a resource.
Yes.
As opposed to a hindrance.
Yes.
They're open to listen and provide things that they weren't open to years ago. And that's a stark difference from the past. As you continue to lead, I anticipate that there'll be more and more changes that are better for society. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to thank you all, my gentlemen to my right and left on this panel, Mr. Nixon and Mr. Woods, for all that you do and having an open opinion to talk to Department of Corrections. There are so many people who already have a made up mind of Department of Corrections and what we believe and what we do, and that's not always the case. We are individuals just like everyone else, and we look for the good in people. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you guys, and definitely I've known her for years and years, and the work that you are doing is phenomenal and it's life-saving. I wouldn't say that for everybody that's in the department. I think there need to be some more changes in terms of far as video visits. You know, people get visit restrictions from one person and can't see their loved ones, you know, for over a year. You know, there needs to be some more adjustments there, and we're going to continue to challenge that. You know, I know legislators want to change that, you know, and so because it's vitally important that family members have access to their loved ones. And so although we applaud the great work that you're doing and the department is doing in so many areas, there's room for improvement, and we want to be at the table to be a part of that improvement. You know, so again, thank the NAACP. The NAACP has been a fixture within the Michigan Department of Corrections for decades. You know, I led the NAACP on the inside, and so I thank God for their advocacy behind prison bars, and looking for that to be even stronger in the coming years.
Well, I'd like to close and say I thank all the panelists for this fruitful and thoughtful and insightful discussion. I think everyone here in the audience has been enriched and has more knowledge and tools to go back to their respective folks, families, communities to assist where we can and advocate for good policy for folks that need a voice. And so with that, I would like to let's give our panelists a round of applause for the great work they did. We appreciate you, and I will turn this back over to Attorney Craig.
You know, before Dorian goes, I was a little bit negligent earlier because I didn't let you know what you were in store for. Not only is Dorian an attorney.
That's right.
But he's an ordained minister.
Yes, he is.
So you know his head's in the right place. You know his heart is in the right place. Thank you, my brother. Thank you to all the panelists. There's somebody else whose head is in the right place and whose heart's in the right place too. And I'm glad she's here, because without the help, I mean, we're here at Wayne County Community College District. We're here every year. We take 4 Saturdays out of their schedule to come here and put on these programs. So I just want to say thanks to WC3D, and I want to ask if our distinguished Dr. Yvette, please come forward, just to say something to us. She is the person who really makes all of this work. We come to her and we ask her, can we just have some space? And she says, of course. Dr. Anderson.
So thank you, panelists. It was, Ms. Smith, it was just really, really interesting to hear your perspective. Gentlemen, thank you for all that you do. Mr. Woods, you know, you and I, we got something special. We got something special that we're gonna be working on, right? All right. My name is Yvette McElroy Anderson, and I serve as the Executive Director for Government Relations for Wayne County Community College District. And on behalf of our Chancellor, Dr. Curtis L. Ivory, and the Board of Trustees, I'd like to welcome you to our downtown campus. Dr. Brian Singleton serves as the president here, and he is also the Vice Chancellor for Student Services. I love what is happening here in terms of Crockett Law School. It's just such a great opportunity to give the community and citizens, everyday citizens, the perspectives about the legal system and things that we probably wouldn't have an opportunity to be embraced with if you've never had contacts or had the experience to be outside of jury duty in a legal system or a courtroom. So I want to commend the Detroit branch NAACP, its leadership and committees, my sorors that participate with the Detroit branch NAACP, the leadership, Dr. Correga, and just the whole entire team. I just want you to give them a hand for what they do and what they bring to our communities. Could we take that time to do that? So here at WC3D, we are committed to learning because we know that learning leads to better lives. If you haven't had the opportunity, I implore you to check out our Health and Wellness Center. It is a beautiful facility, state-of-the-art equipment. It's 6 days a week. Wayne County residents have some special opportunities to attend and become members of the Health and Wellness Center at a discounted membership rate. Seniors, even more. I know I don't see no seniors in here though. No seniors are in here. But seniors get another discount. Another thing that we're really, really proud of is the Wayne County Community College District Culinary Arts and Hospitality Center. That's at our Northwest campus. And Chef Spratling is the chef there. And it is absolutely phenomenal. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility. And Wayne County residents, the 34 cities that we represent, that's your facility. Please, please, please check it out. Watch our website because we're having opportunities for tastings on Wednesdays. It's called The View, and we invite citizens and folks to come and pay a small fee and have lunch. So look for that opportunity. It's also available for rent. Yes, and catering is, so if there's something that you're interested in hosting, then that's also something I implore you to consider because it is absolutely beautiful. Visit our website, you can get more information about it. And finally, our Health and Wellness Center is also over at the Northwest campus, and there's an opportunity for those who need dental care. Our students are doing hygiene appointments at our Northwest campus, so you can check that out. And finally, there's a health and job fair on Tuesday, October 24th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., I believe it is. And there's going to be employers there, as well as opportunities to exercise and get health information. So I just want you to take advantage of every resource that Wayne County Community College District provides. We are committed to our community, our faculty, staff, and especially our students. It's where learning leads to a better life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. You know, really, I didn't know y'all were doing all that. When you say we're gonna have lunch? We're gonna go over to, which campus was it? Northwest on Outer Drive in Southfield. On what day of the week? Okay. The View Wednesdays, Southfield Outer Drive. Thank you all so very much. I'm gonna do something a little differently today. Because I see people here that I've seen before, and I think it would be unfortunate of me if I didn't at least recognize you all. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask the young lady in the back to take the mic around and just let everybody introduce themselves. Would you do that, please? Starting right over there with the gentleman in the Detroit Tigers baseball cap.
Yes, my name is Michael Washington. Well, really, I already graduated. I just come with my mom because she needs assistance getting around and whatnot. So she's in the paralegal program, and so that's how I found out about this.
So how come you're not in the paralegal program?
Oh, well, I graduated from Wayne State.
Oh, okay. So now you ready for Wayne State University Law School?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay,
All right.
that's a good thing, but thank you so much for helping your mother.
Oh, also, I was wondering, is there a way I could like download this video footage and watch this again later? I really enjoyed the panel.
It's on YouTube and Facebook. she
Okay,
says. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
My name is Gloria Washington, and I've been to all of the sessions so far.
I know, I see you every week.
And I am in the paralegal program. I've graduated many, many times before, but this is now become my passion. So I want to know more about the legal field.
Great.
And how to assist others, who need help.
Great. Listen, one of the reasons we have this Crockett Law School, you may notice we don't bring in a lot of legal professionals with all these long titles behind them. We bring in people with real experience to tell you about real stuff, because our philosophy is each one teach one. So this is a community effort to get folks in the community to know what is out there. You might say, well, why would you have exonerees coming in talking at law school? Because we want you to know, first of all, that there are innocent people in prison. We secondly want you to know that innocent people can get out of prison. And then we want you to know how to help people, whether they were innocent or guilty, who've been to prison, who are now returning to our community, how we help them to make the adjustment to return. And we want you to know who's on the inside at the MDOC, who can also help us. She's always been, this isn't her first time coming out to help somebody. She works for the system, but she also works for the people who are in the system. So very important. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Washington. You missed somebody. Okay.
Hey, how you doing? My
Good.
name is Leon Benson, and I'm an exoneree.
Okay.
I'm also a member of Organization Exonerees, one of the organizations that really helped me out in my reentry process. I only been home for 6 months, and I really feel that's a great opportunity with guys that's being a part of the solution, who were a part of the broken corks of the system. And this is my first time coming here. I really appreciate it. I like the way it was organized, great questions, and it definitely shows our excellence here in Detroit. I happen to be in Indiana 25 years. So now coming up here and seeing, my home, Michigan, Detroit, just doing what they doing, I love it. And I want to take it to other places, because we seeing this Mecca being revitalized and what it used to be. And it come down to what you said, the real people that's doing the real work.
Right.
So it's an honor being here. So thank you for inviting me, as well as the panelists as well. You too, Ms. Smith.
Y'all stop picking on Miss Smith. She she a good person. Yes,
Oh. Hello, my name's Madison. This is my second year attending the community law school. I really enjoyed it. I'm a student here at WC3D, and I am also in the paralegal program. So, thank you.
so tell us, as a paralegal student, what is there a way for us to even make this program better? Your thoughts? What if we had it every week? Would that be better or would that be overwhelming? Now, they're staff, so don't pay them no mind.
I think giving more opportunities to attend would be very beneficial, to have it almost all, all year round rather than just in the fall. I think it would give opportunities for a variety of different speakers to have more availability to schedule more opportunities for stuff like
Okay,
this.
so now I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever worked as a grant writer? So you can write a grant for us, so we can have a year round.
To work on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No. Right next to you.
You don't want to
Come on.
introduce yourself?
I know this is his first time because I haven't seen him before, so come on with it, brother.
My name is Lee Wheeler. Yeah, it's just my first time here. She said it'd be interesting and she was right.
Okay, thank you very much. We hope, unlike the Department of Corrections, we don't want your first time to be your last time. We want to be the next time and the next time. Thank you.
My name is Brenda Edwards, and today is my first time. I wasn't aware of it, but I was invited in, and it won't be my last. But I didn't get an opportunity to ask a question, and maybe someone can answer this.
Okay,
I was not aware that you had to have a CCW to carry a taser in Michigan.
a taser is a dangerous weapon. It is regulated. So your next question.
Well, that was it, because my niece, I had purchased her one, and she had it in her side door pocket, and she got stopped in Oakland County, and she had to stay overnight. And I told her she could have called me. I could have got her out of jail, at least paid her bail. And so, but now she has a record. So she was, she's a college student. She wasn't doing anything else illegal. She was just going out county to party. Long story short, I'm just trying to figure out a way that this can come off of her record.
When did it happen?
2020.
Okay, so she's got more than 3 years since it happened?
Yes, sir.
Or is this early 2020 or?
Middle to the
Okay.
fall of 2020.
In your packet, you have a sheet that says expungement.
Yes, sir.
Look that over, and at the bottom of it, it gives you an address, online address for you to contact us,
Yes, sir.
and we will have her come into the office. We do we pull a record called an iChat, Internet Criminal History, whatever it is.
Yes, sir.
We look at that and we see if she qualifies for an expungement. Has she been waiting long enough? Is her record sufficient that she qualifies? If so,
Yes,
free of charge,
Okay.
we take her through the process.
Okay.
So if you don't have that sheet, before you leave, get it from somebody out at the table outside
Okay.
and contact us.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We got the lady next to you. You want to say something? No. Robert? Robert? Be reasonable. Give her the mic. I want to hear your voice. Don't deprive me like that. Okay, go ahead.
My name is Brianna Hayes. I am a paralegal student here. I am actually attending today, which is my second day because my professor told me about it last week. But I thought it was interesting to get more knowledgeable information because I myself have experienced some injustice with the system. So just trying to receive some information on how I can go about getting this situation taken care of.
Call us. Thank you. Now, lunch is here. So I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna let y'all go on down, help yourself. And shortly we'll resume the program, but take your time and enjoy your lunch. And thank you for being here. Thank the panelists.
you enjoyed your lunch. I enjoyed. This afternoon, we continue with our George W. Crockett Community Law School. And we're going to have some very, very valuable information coming from a very, very distinguished and learned attorney, Attorney Jermaine Wyrick. He is a native Detroiter, although I see in his biography that he's a little bit conflicted. A little conflicted now. You don't know quite where he's at. Well, see, he got his bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan. But then he went over to Ohio State. I don't know what that's about. I just can't believe a guy from Michigan would go to Ohio State. Oh, okay. All right. Well, that explains it. But he did come back and he got his law degree from Wayne State. And he's worked in so many different capacities. You got his biography in your packet. Yeah, I don't need to read all that. So I'm just going to ask Jermaine if he would come up here and talk to us about criminal law and about traffic law. Without further ado, thank you.
Good afternoon, justice seekers that are here in person. It's good to see you, and virtually. I have a few friends that say they're watching virtually, so I appreciate you on both ends. The most fundamental aspect to traffic law, of course, is driving a motor vehicle. And the one thing that I always emphasize when I talk to people about traffic law, as basic or as fundamental as it may seem, whether it's a young teenager who's first starting to learn to drive or an older person, it's always necessary for you to have three things when you drive a motor vehicle: your driver's license, your registration, and your insurance. And the nice thing about technology with cell phones is that we're no longer really required to have the physical insurance certificate or registration. We could actually have them stored on a cell phone. So that's I guess, the most fundamental aspect to driving a motor vehicle. Also, one of the things, and I think this is where there's kind of a fusion between criminal law and traffic law, is that oftentimes when you're in a traffic situation or a criminal situation, the situation is really about what you call the police encounter, the police-citizen encounter. And one of the things that I would kind of even give you, even in terms of a tactical or administrative thing that you should know, and if I think you don't take any other note, maybe take this one today, is that oftentimes the situation when there's some type of conflict or dispute as it relates to traffic or criminal law, it centers around how you can kind of approach the situation from the standpoint of behavior. So believe it or not, police officers are trained in what you call de-escalation techniques. And part of the reason I say believe it or not is because, unfortunately, the continued need for the NAACP and civil rights organizations are really in large part predicated upon some of the tragedies or atrocities that we've seen, whether you want to talk about George Floyd or other situations. And there's a laundry list of situations where you've seen unarmed Black men who have been abiding by the law, that have done nothing wrong, in some instances, even in motor vehicles, tragically killed by the police. And the reason that I bring up those tragedies and atrocities is to kind of give you information and leverage in terms of, if you find yourself pulled over by police, it can be, quite frankly, a nerve-wracking situation for any of us. And in order to handle that encounter appropriately, to give you the most likelihood for success in that encounter that day, or even when you go to court as well, part of the reason I'll tell you about this notion of escalation or de-escalation, and the two terms are actually quite opposite from one another, is that although officers are trained to de-escalate situations, and ideally when they do, they're doing their job in an admirable, noble way, in the way that it should be done. But as the citizen, I think it's important for you to also understand the situations that you should remain calm. And the reason that I emphasize that is that oftentimes by remaining calm, you yourself are de-escalating the situation. And by de-escalation, the term that I'm actually defining here is basically not making a problem worse. You know, there's an old saying, you know, not making a mountain out of a molehill. So you may find yourself, if you're pulled over in a molehill situation, but you know, if you're angry with the officer, if you start trying to cuss them out or call them out of their name or something disrespectful or derogatory, as opposed to de-escalating the situation by remaining calm, you're actually escalating the situation by having an attitude or something of that nature. So I think it's important to actually understand that. So we could go to the next slide from there. One of the big things I'll talk about, and I'm not here to talk at you, I want to talk with you. So I'm not going to talk a long time today. I would rather, quite frankly, field your questions, but I'll explain just kind of like the process of the criminal justice system for those of you that may not be familiar with it, but it's important, I think, for all of us to know it. Really, a criminal case here in the state of Michigan starts with what you call an arraignment on a warrant. And the purpose of that arraignment on a warrant is more or less to inform the accused, who oftentimes, and at that point, unfortunately for them, are deprived of their freedom. They're in custody and they're in jail somewhere or detention. And if it's a juvenile, it's called detention. It's not called jail. But in some way or another, the arraignment, the purpose of the arraignment on a warrant is basically to tell that person what they're accused of, even in terms of whether or not there's any maximum or a minimum jail sentences for that, and also to set a bond. And it's important when the bond is set that it be set reasonable. There's actually case law that's actually referenced in a few slides later, which actually dictates, you know, whether bond is considered reasonable. And it's really, to me, imperative that the individual have an attorney, although they're not necessarily always appointed at that point, but they could be retained at that point, to advocate on their behalf, to basically say that, you know, whatever the alleged allegations are against that individual is just an isolated incident, to get into that person's background in terms of their family background, their educational background, things of that nature, anything that could possibly be favorable in terms of them. One of the things I've done as a retained attorney, quite frankly, I've even gathered character references as early as the arraignment stage and literally sent them over by email or sometime even in person to whoever's making the decision as it relates to bond. Going to the next slide. And this kind of goes more or less to the end of the case, but I think it's really the most important part of the case. And there are different standards of proof. And if any of you all have any questions about standards of proof at any stages of the process, that's fine. But before you really get to this last stage, which is the decision-making stage of beyond a reasonable doubt, generally procedurally, you have the first stage in a felony criminal case is actually called a preliminary examination. And the purpose of the preliminary examination is just to determine whether or not there's even sufficient evidence to charge someone with a crime. And it's called a probable cause standard. Probable cause means that under the facts and circumstances, a reasonable person would believe a crime is committed. So one of the things that I always explain to my clients is that this way, and I try to give people a visual. Probable cause is like the floor. It's like the lowest standard of proof under the law. One of the jokes that we say as criminal defense attorneys, quite frankly, is that you could put a ham sandwich over in a defense table and point at that ham sandwich and say that the ham sandwich did something wrong, and that ham sandwich would literally be criminally indicted or charged, formally charged, based upon a probable cause standard. But this standard, the beyond a reasonable doubt, which for criminal defense attorneys is the favorite standard in law, period, is the highest standard of proof under the law. So the visual that I always give people in that regard is that the beyond a reasonable doubt standard is really the ceiling. It doesn't get higher than the beyond a reasonable doubt standard in law, period. And that's just by virtue of the fact that even for civil cases or for family cases, you have a lower burden of proof. You have what you call the preponderance of the evidence or clear and convincing if it involves juvenile, family, or civil. So you have kind of like the middle of the room. And by that, I mean, it's not the floor, not that low standard of probable cause, but it's not that high standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. because what's generally thought is that we value our freedom and our liberty more than money. You can't replace time, you can replace money. So that's a big part. So going beyond in terms of how a reasonable doubt is defined, is basically a fair and honest doubt based upon the evidence or the lack of evidence. It's not an imaginary possible doubt, so it's not something that you necessarily make up, but it is a fair and reasonable doubt based upon common sense and judgment. And one of the things too, and this is a beginning, I'll cover this first though. One of the things that's important as well, and Michigan has actually improved recently in recent years in this regard, is that under the Sixth Amendment, a person has the right to counsel, and that was actually solidified in a case that's actually referenced there in a slide called Gideon versus Wainwright in 1963, which basically says, not only when a person is accused of a crime are they entitled to an attorney, but if they're indigent, which is oftentimes the case, when people are accused of crimes and they're not able to afford their own attorney, then they have to be appointed one. So it's important to understand that. One of the things that I would emphasize as well that's very, very important, that's not necessarily in the side as well, kind of closely related to the Sixth Amendment, is the Fifth Amendment before that. The Fifth Amendment basically says that you have, or at least part of it says that you have what you call the privilege against self-incrimination. So you all may have heard people say the token or say the phrase, "I'll take the fifth on that," meaning that they'll remain silent. And I think one of the things that I always implore, especially young people, but any person that may not necessarily have had encounters with law enforcement or haven't been accused of a crime, it's so important to basically be quiet and shut up. And the reason that I emphasize that is because oftentimes prosecutors and the police who actually have to make the request for a warrant to the prosecutor really build their cases in large part, or the best way that they build their cases against you oftentimes is based upon admissions or confessions that you may make. And because the Fifth Amendment protects you, and even if you go to trial, a jury cannot hold against you the fact that you don't testify, that you don't say anything. So because that's such an important and valuable right for you to have, I think from the very moment that you encounter the problem, and by that I mean literally the minute that the police walk up on you, it's important to be nice and to be friendly and maybe give basic fundamental information, such as your right name or something of that nature. But when they get into, and by that I mean the police that may be investigating you, when they get to the point whereby they want to start interrogating you or doing something of that nature, it's important to draw the line and say, look, I want to plead the fifth, I want my attorney here. And even if you don't have an attorney, I'll be happy to give any of you all my cell phone number. But even if you don't have an attorney, it's important to say, look, I don't want to get into any detailed conversation about who, what, when, where, and how, because I'm invoking my Fifth Amendment right, and the police have to respect that. So related to that, at the bottom of the slide, there's a case that's referenced. I'm sure many of you all, if you've ever watched any type of TV show in any way, even a fictional one related to law, you've heard of what you call the Miranda. And Miranda is basically when the police pull you over, they're about to arrest you, they're about to put handcuffs on you, and they tell you you had a right to remain silent, and anything that you say can be held against you in court of law. You had a right to an attorney, and if you can't afford one, want to be appointed. That kind of litany or song that they sing to you in terms of an arrest. So, and one of the things that I encounter oftentimes with my clients is when they come to me, they'll tell me, well, when the police arrested me and they didn't read me my Miranda rights, so how does that affect my case? It only affects your case if you make some type of admission or confession. If you take the advice that I gave a few minutes ago where you remain silent, it doesn't really affect your case at all. However, most police departments, especially Detroit, but this even includes suburban communities, in 2023 are sophisticated enough to kind of protect themselves against those types of claims. So in many instances, not only do they have a written Miranda form that they have you not only sign at the bottom, but initial, but oftentimes, given technology being what it is now, they actually record the statements as well. So be prepared for that as well. This is one of my favorite parts of being a criminal defense attorney is what you call jury trials. The one thing that I think every Crockett community law school I've ever spoken at, I always emphasize this, or if I speak in general to the community, if you have the opportunity to go serve on a jury, do so. Don't try to get out of it. Don't try to weasel out of it. It is important. Juries are what you call, I think Abraham Lincoln, as long ago as he lived, said this, are the conscience of the community. By serving on a jury, when we have felony cases here in the state of Michigan, it's comprised basically of 12 jurors that actually reach the decision, although 14 are seated. And you go in and there's probably about 40 or 50 people that's whittled down to. But the reason that I emphasize that is oftentimes, we're appalled if we see a news story where we hear that somebody, and Detroit has actually paid out a lot of money on this, our taxpayer dollars in recent years. We hear of somebody getting out of prison. I was actually having a conversation this morning with one of my buddies, and we was talking about the Innocence Project, and you hear about situations where guys went into prison in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and they've served 25, 30 years in prison, wrongfully so, because they had a bad trial or bad situation. And a lot of that, quite frankly, to me, although, sometimes those were like, the cases weren't presented the way that they should have, and that's why they ended up in that situation. But oftentimes the difference could have been one good juror who could have, for lack of a better way of saying it, seen through the nonsense of what was going on and stood up and said, look, we shouldn't convict this lady or gentleman, whoever was convicted. So the thing that that's like the thing to the day I die, I will always be on. If I come speak and I just say one thing, it would be serve on a jury, because it frustrates me, quite frankly, when I'm picking juries and I see people come up with the most asinine excuses. I have a vacation planned 2 weeks from now, or I'm all of a sudden I had this religious conversion and I saw them at church last week, and I know, so I'm saying that to say, whatever the case may be, if you have the opportunity to go serve, the one time I served on the jury, I was in my young 20s, it was here in federal court. And quite frankly, even one of the most important principles of a jury is for the jury to be fair and impartial. And oftentimes, juries, and I have my clients look at me sometimes and be like, that doesn't look like a jury that's fair and impartial to me, or representative of me. And part of the reason is that a lot of times people, for whatever reason, or different reasons, and I call them more or less excuses than reasons, try to get out of it. So go and serve. That's my what do you probably get on my soapbox for the moment today. But anyway, but when you have a jury trial, what's important to understand too, even when we talk about very important issues of race, there's a case that came out of the U.S. Supreme Court called the Batson case, which basically says that jurors cannot be struck for reasons as it relates to race. And that was specifically designed to prevent an instance where you have an African-American on trial and the prosecutor striking jurors who are African-American out of the notion that African-Americans may be more sympathetic to that person, which in my experience may or may not be true. But it's more or less to protect from racism interjecting into the decision-making of a jury. There's also a case that I have referenced there that actually is more recent than Batson, that came out of Michigan called People versus Bryant, which actually stands for the same notion. Right to bill, we talked about this a few minutes earlier. Under the 8th Amendment, there's a protection against what you call cruel and unusual punishment. One of the more important principles to understand, even in terms of when a magistrate, which is a person, an attorney, kind of between the attorney and the judge stage of the decision making, when a magistrate or judge determines bail or bond, really they're looking in the cases referenced there, and there's even a statute on it, whether or not that person poses a flight risk or is a danger to the community. So oftentimes, the more serious the case is, the less likely that a person will be bonded out. Quite frankly, I have a few clients now, one charged with murder, one charged with CSC, that's a little salty at me that they're not able to get out on a bond. Well, it's difficult to get out on a bond when you're charged with something very, very serious. And whereby if you're not charged with something as serious, the likelihood of a bond is much more likely, even though COVID kind of changed that a little bit too. Police misconduct, what's important to understand, and I referenced the atrocities and even give some statistics there that Black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by the police, and the police kill about 1,000 people every year. 8% are homicide. It's important to understand when we kind of look at these situations is that case that I have referenced there called Graham versus Connor. When a officer makes a decision, and oftentimes they even say it's quote unquote a split-second decision, meaning it's one that has to be made relatively quickly. The standard under Graham versus Connor basically says that the decision of the officer has to be objectively reasonable, meaning, give George Floyd as an example, standing on somebody's neck or breathway or kneeing somebody for 8 or 9 minutes so they can't breathe is not objectively reasonable under any circumstances. And that's why it was good that those officers were convicted in that matter. It's not about what you call the quote unquote subjective opinions of the officer. So I'm saying that to say if a person wants to be in law enforcement and they're paranoid of people for whatever reason, they're really in the wrong line of work. And I give you a hypothetical on that. Just say, for instance, and it's very important even in terms of encounters to not, and this is what I talked about earlier about escalation or de-escalation, but it's important to not give the impression to the officer that, and this is why your attitude and everything is so important, for that officer not to think that you pose a danger. But just say, for instance, we all carry around cell phones now, right? If an officer in his subjective opinion thinks that your cell phone is a firearm, if that's his subjective opinion and that's so objectively unreasonable, then that violates that 1989 case that I just referenced, Graham versus Connor. One of the good things too, and this was actually a case that came right here, although it's a Michigan Supreme Court case, fairly recently, 2022, I call it a driving while black case. What the Grand Rapids Police Department was doing is that they were literally pulling people over and fingerprinting them without a warrant, without probable cause. Now, even if you're pulled over and accused of operating while impaired, if they draw your blood, they're actually supposed to go to a judge and get a search warrant to do that. So one of the good protections about this case is that it leans more toward individual and constitutional rights and protects individuals against what you would call intrusive behavior, fingerprinting, taking your blood, things of that nature without probable cause or without a search warrant. Search and seizure, what's important to understand is that the Fourth Amendment protects your expectation of privacy. As the cases that I have delineated there, what's important to understand, specifically the Katz case, is that your Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures are to you as an individual person. So say, for instance, my bag here that I have my laptop in, it doesn't have any Fourth Amendment rights, or your car or your house doesn't have any Fourth Amendment rights because they're considered personal property, separate and aside from you. But if you're in your house, which is kind of considered your castle under what they call the castle doctrine, or if you're in your car, you have certain privacy rights. But as the slide also references, it relates to standing as well. So say, for instance, God forbid, somebody breaks into your house, they don't have the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. When a burglar alarm is going off and the police are responding to your house, they can't say, you can't come in my house because it's not their house anyway. But if the police suspect you of a crime, then that's a situation whereby they have to secure a search warrant to come in, especially if you don't consent or object. There are certain exceptions to the search warrant besides the search warrant, such as consent or exigent circumstances. If they think, say, for instance, by the time they get a search warrant, somebody might be dead or seriously injured, then a search warrant isn't always necessary for a car or a home as well. Expungements, there's been a lot of developments favorably for people that have been tarnished or scarred by criminal records for years within relatively recent years here in the state of Michigan. As the slide reflects, the 2021 Clean Slate Act here in Michigan now allows up to 3 felonies, but they also have to be basically less than life offenses. So you can't get a murder case expunged or another case that carries a life offense expunged. And even for what you would consider to be a serious felony, something that would carry a maximum penalty of 10 or 15 years, such as assault with intent to commit grave bodily harm, less than murder, something of that nature, you can only get one of those expunged, and they have to be with 2 other more harmless type offenses, such as carrying a concealed weapon or something of that nature. Driving under the influence, which is commonly known as drunk driving, you can now get an expungement after 5 years. The state of Michigan this year actually enacted what you call an automatic expungement, meaning certain misdemeanors that have been adjudicated at least 7 years ago, or certain felonies that were adjudicated 10 years ago can be expunged as well. I think that's about it, unless you guys have questions. I'll be happy to entertain. Oh, firearm rights. What's important to understand too about firearms, because this is a big issue in the city too. The best, although it doesn't sound practical if you're trying to, for lack of a better way of saying it, prevent a carjacking, the best place to have your weapon is in the trunk of the car. I recently had a case dismissed on that basis. And that's just the most practical advice I could give you as far as CPL or open carry, or however you may want to define it. I don't necessarily want to read everything verbatim. I kind of have a lot delineated for you. For my virtual friends, I'd be happy to email you the handout if you need it. Thank you.
Yeah, that question. That question.
Hey, how you doing today?
How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing okay. First and foremost, you gave a great presentation about these basic rights that citizens have. I'm gonna be turning exoneree. You know, unfortunately, with me being innocent at the age of 22, when cops said, "Where were you?" I'm like, man, I was over there in this building right here. They read my Miranda rights, but I was just so eager to tell the truth, and they twisted it on me and used it and really, you know, gave me 25 years. Another thing I wanted to point out too is the reasonable doubt, the presumption of innocence over guilt. And you spoke about the consciousness of the juries being a consciousness of society. Unfortunately, implicit bias affects all portions of society. And if you are already marginalized by society from your background and who you are, is there really a such thing as a fair trial?
And that's where it's imperative for you to have a zealous advocate to push for that.
Okay.
And quite frankly, that's one of the reasons that I just emphasize so much for us to go and to serve on juries. One of the judges, and I won't name him because I'm not necessarily, literally has a sign on his courtroom door saying, if you're awaiting trial or in custody, you can still vote and you can still serve on a jury. And one of the interesting things I've seen in a couple of juries that I've had this year is that people are now showing up that have had criminal convictions to jury service. I think that's wonderful. And the reason that I say that is because that, to me, broadens what that jury pool is composed of. So I don't think, you know, I'm sorry that you had your experience, but part of the reason that I emphasize for people to serve on juries is to kind of guard against those types of.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I do everything within my power. I can't represent everybody. Right. But I do everything within my power to ensure that whatever client of mine is treated fairly and that we get everything that we can to any type of wrongful conviction. Because as you said, and I hear that story quite quite frequently from my clients, quite frankly, is that, I was just trying to do the right thing and started talking to them and then they twisted what I said. And it's in no disrespect to law enforcement, because there are a lot of great law enforcement officers. But oftentimes when you start, opening that can of worms, I always tell my clients, loose lip sync ship, just keep it.
Right.
Because, that in and of itself, sometimes there's power in being quiet. And a lot of people don't understand that because they think the exact opposite. Like, I gotta start advocating for myself. No, that's when you hire an attorney or you get an attorney to advocate for it.
Definitely, I'm a living testimony to that. Another question. One thing, because I was afflicted, I'm just as impacted. I understand this from personal experience. And through my journey, 25 years wrongful incarceration, I was a jailhouse lawyer as well. While I was on the inside, litigated pro se on my own many years. And it was the basis of my exoneration in the end. How can we get, or where do we go to set up these platforms to touch the people who are affected by these disadvantages the most, like in urban communities? Like, I hate to say it, but like just watching the first 48, everything you said was violated. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, man, just be quiet, man. Don't do this. But more or less, what are some strategies you got in place, or some suggestions that you would make of how we can further this conversation into the communities, to the youth, to the people who are afflicted by this lack of knowledge the most?
Each one reach one. I mean, bring, your friends, to events such as this. I mean, I started practicing in 97 and NAACP was having Crockett Community Law School then. So I'm saying that to say, I mean, and this isn't the only forum in which you can bring people to, but I think even from the standpoint of you may find this very surprising. I don't watch the first 48. I very rarely watch the news now. Sometimes you have to do things in a constructive manner to distance yourself from, for lack of a better way of saying it, that negative or toxic type environment. You can't always take, especially given what you've gone through, you can't always take the weight of the shoulders, the weight of the world on your shoulders. You have to start to think strategically, what do I do that at this point in my life is going to bring me happiness? I met a brother literally 2 days ago, similar situation to yours. He was, and I had a nice conversation with him. He's at University of Michigan, I enrolled, and he started out in a community college. And so I'm saying that to say, if you get yourself busy a lot of times, you can't necessarily worry about what other people are doing so wrong, because you're so busy trying to do right that you're really going to make a positive difference and be more impactful than you realize.
Hello again. I am reading a question from online, the Zoom chat. The first part of the question states, I am unclear about the role of the police. They seem to be out of control. Do you believe that the citizens' role is remaining calm is the biggest remedy? That's the first question.
Absolutely, because if you engage in the opposite behavior, if you make a bad situation where even if the officer is rude, mean, racist, you name it, you're not going to win an encounter with somebody that has a badge and a gun and a lot of backup, and by that I mean other officers that they could come and call to back them up. I forget, somewhere last week, my young daughter was in the car and there was like a backup situation. She's like, Daddy, why is there 2 police cars there? So I'm saying that to say, no matter what you have to really, for lack of a better way of saying it, take your ego out of the situation and be humble. And if that officer is completely wrong, you want to live to see your day in court to advocate through an attorney that you were wronged in court. You don't want to make a bad situation worse by giving that officer some reason. Oh, I think he's reaching for his gun. I'm about to reach for my glove box. And you might not even have a knife or a weapon or anything in your glove box, a firearm that would do anything. But if you give him reason to think, oh, on the police video, we're gonna show he was reaching for something and we thought he was reaching for something was a firearm, and it may not have been. You're dead. What good are you doing the community, your family, anybody, by engaging in angry, irrational behavior on the scene? None. You better off to live to see that next day, so then you can start vindicating your rights fully in court or wherever else I mean, here in Detroit, there's a civilian review board that you're supposed to be able to complain to.
The next question is rape expungible?
Any other questions? I have a few questions. Starting with open carry. A lot of controversy now in Michigan about open carry as opposed to CPL. First of all, can you talk about what's meant by open carry?
I think the slide more or less explains that, and I will to the best of, actually, if you look right there where I start with the 4, for those who don't have a CPL, carrying a pistol in a motor vehicle can still be considered lawful if not loaded, kept in a case specifically designed for firearms, in an area that cannot be accessed from the vehicle's cabin, such as a trunk. So as I stated, I recently had a case dismissed whereby literally, because they kind of suspected my client for narcotic activity, and they kind of, and he probably talked more than he should have. And they started searching the vehicle and basically found a firearm, I think based upon what he told them, in the trunk of the vehicle, and they still charged him with CCW. So I'm saying not to say, but the way we were able to have it dismissed is that by him having it in the trunk, it's a completely different scenario from him having it in the glove compartment or somewhere within reach while he's driving or a passenger in the vehicle, because they don't figure that you can draw it or access it if it's within the passenger compartment as opposed to the trunk.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a situation on a call that I had where a person was open carrying in Michigan, which means you don't have to have a CPL. But they had on a jacket like I have on right now, and the jacket covered the gun. So the police took the position that's not open.
Because you can't see it.
Right.
That's concealed.
That's what I want you to talk about.
Right. So, and here's the thing that to me is, notwithstanding the fact I'm a criminal defense attorney, I don't really like firearms again. So I'm saying that to say, I remember an event, and I'm not going to name the event, that when those laws first started changing, it was a major cultural event that people like to go to during the summertime. And the event promoters were more or less promoting the notion that you could come to this event and open carry. Now, I think, and I try not to be too judgmental about that, but I'm human just like anybody else. If you have a firearm and you're trying to protect yourself, okay, what's the point of having that firearm if everybody can see that you got a firearm? For one thing, if I had a firearm like that, I would be scared somebody's gonna come and bust me in the back of my head and take that firearm or rob me or do something like really, really scary. So I'm saying that to say, while I understand that, people may want to open carry and have it visibly shown that they have that firearm, which is, and I've had cases similar to yours. I had a case recently where the guys was like walking in the party store, and I don't even think they had a jacket on. It was more or less like the way that their shirt was pulled or tucked or whatever, you could see the firearm. So where open carry is dangerous is that it has to be open. It has to be visible. If it's not visible, it's considered concealed, which is a crime.
Okay. Earlier this morning, we had a question about, I think it was pepper spray, and whether that is in fact considered a weapon that has to be registered, etc. Comment on that? It was a taser. Taser. But I also want you to comment on pepper spray.
A taser and pepper spray are both considered weapon. As I recall, I've never heard of a situation where you have to necessarily register either one of them, like you do a firearm. Like when you first buy a firearm, you're duty bound to actually go and register it. But consider a taser is a form of a firearm. Arguably, I would think so.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, technically, you're supposed to have that to carry pepper spray, which, you know, for lack of a better way of saying it, kind of bewilders me. I remember when I was at University of Michigan, just about every girl I knew had pepper spray. I don't necessarily think most of them had CPL. So it's surprising to come to the realization that technically to carry a taser, the pepper spray, the same obligations that you would have if you carried a firearm, because I don't really refer to it as gun, and we could get into that for semantics, but you're supposed to be licensed to do that.
So in order to get a CPL, you have to meet a series of requirements. You have to qualify. Now, how would that work for pepper spray? Because what would be the qualifications there as to be able to carry a gun?
Yeah, I mean, but it's just a weapon is a weapon. So, you know, you pepper spray somebody, you could blind them. I mean, worst case scenario. So
So do they have training for that, like they do with carrying a pistol safely?
no, not necessarily training, but if you go through the training that's required for a CPL and you get a CPL, then you're qualified to carry pepper spray legally.
Thank you.
Earlier, you talked about the arraignment process, the warrant process and arraignment process. Some people, you know, if you watch these police shows, they say the policeman's gonna issue a warrant for your arrest, which isn't true. The warrant is issued by the prosecutor. But I want you to talk a little bit about the process where if you're stopped by the police, whether you are detained or arrested, when do your Miranda rights kick in? And then secondly, that arrest process leading to a warrant process and whether a warrant can be denied by the prosecutor.
Those are great questions. One, just say for instance, hypothetically speaking, a police officer walked in here right now and started talking to any of us casually, okay? We're not necessarily detained or arrested, okay? And the real question, and this is something, you know, a little bit contrary to what I said earlier, but you can't ask the officer is, am I free to leave? Because the mark of delineation between when you're detained and arrested and they're just engaging in a casual conversation is if they say, no, you're not free to leave, then at that point you consider detained at a minimum. You're arrested typically, as you visually see, when they literally start putting the handcuffs on you and walking you away, or even if you're on the roadside. And where Miranda kicks in, if you're just having the casual conversation with them and you say whatever, the police will be like, he wasn't handcuffed, he was free to leave, and he told me that, you know, he beat up his girlfriend last night or whatever, okay? So that in and of itself doesn't trigger Miranda because y'all just had a casual conversation. You were free to leave. You weren't handcuffed. You weren't arrested. You weren't at the jail or the police station or wherever they're going to. You weren't even in a police car. So the real determination in terms of detain and arrest is if you're free to leave.
Okay. You also talked about.
Oh, I didn't answer your second question.
Okay, go ahead.
In terms of the request for a warrant, what's important to know, I'll give you like a few practical, I have a few cases now whereby my clients were arrested, okay? And we haven't heard anything from the court yet, okay? And the reason we haven't heard anything from the court yet is because when an individual is arrested, no matter how innocuous, and by that I mean something that may not be that serious. It could be for a traffic offense, quite frankly. If they're arrested for a traffic offense versus the other end of the spectrum, if they're arrested for quote unquote murder, the fact of the matter is, once the police arrest someone, they conduct an investigation. Based upon that investigation, they then, if they feel as though they believe, and this is police, not necessarily any attorneys involved, that there's probable cause to believe a crime was committed, they then, in writing, send a written request down to the prosecutor's office, wherever that prosecutor's office may be, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb. And then based upon reviewing that request for a warrant, then you have, this is where the attorneys get involved. You have a warrant prosecutor that will look at that written request from the police and say, well, yeah, I agree with the police here, a crime was committed, or I don't agree with it. So really the charging decision is not necessarily made, and by the charging decision, whether or not the court process is going to start, is made by the prosecutor, not by the police.
Okay. On the roadside, you're saying remain silent even if the police officer becomes belligerent. I have heard that if you're concerned about your safety, you can request that a command officer be called to the scene.
Yeah, that's a good practical advice.
All right, so tell us about that.
And also I think what's important too, because situations get dicey. I know I got pulled over 3 or 4 years ago on Southfield Freeway near Joy Road, and it was like relatively dark, and it was hard to see. And I think it was like an unmarked car. It was an unmarked, like, Detroit Police Department car. And you hear these stories, and this is part of the reason I don't watch the news either anymore. But you hear these stories about, like, people impersonating the police, and to be honest with you, I might have been speeding a little bit. Yeah, I got a little bit late, but I wasn't really going like that fast. I mean, for the Southfield Freeway. So I'm like, is this like a real police car pulling me over, or is this like somebody impersonating the police pulling me over? Because like I said, it wasn't fully marked. It was on the DPD's unmarked car. So what I did, and this is what I would advise any of you all who may have that same concern, I put on my hazard lights. I pulled up off of the Southfield Freeway with my, and this, I probably drove at least half a mile like that. I put on my hazard light. That's to let the police officers know, like, look, if they are real police, I see you behind me. I'm acknowledging your authority. I'm respecting your authority, but I'm putting myself in a safe position as well. And what I did, I pulled up, because it was like dark outside, it was about 8:39. I pulled up into the next well-lit gas station that I could find, because most of them have a lot of people and, video cameras and everything else. And then, I was at a point of safety at that point. So that's one thing that I would advise people to do too.
But in that situation where you keep driving, officers sometimes will charge you with fleeing and eluding.
They're not supposed to if you have those hazard lights on. That's supposed to kind of be your protective measure, like I said, recognizing, like, look, I know you're trying to pull me over. I see a lot of fleeing and eluding cases. The fleeing and eluding cases I see is, sometimes I even see guys like literally try to fake police out. Like, I'll pull over and then I'll wait till they get out of the car and then I'll pull off again. That's when you create like big problems, because if they got to call back up and they got to run, and yeah, they're not gonna like you. And when you start making new enemies of police, then that's problematic.
Any other questions? Yes.
So could you speak on a situation where someone had they stated they were higher than the PD, and they ended up doing a raid, said the police. When they kicked the door in, they never showed a search warrant. And they said they did have to, that you can go down to the prosecuting office to retrieve that search warrant. In what cases, what should be done in that instance?
I mean, that could very well be misconduct. If I would definitely advise that individual to file a civilian complaint, which if it happened in Detroit, you can because they're generally supposed to leave a copy of the search warrant at the home, even if you don't quote unquote see it initially. And certainly if it's a legitimate search warrant, it should be FOIA, and by that I mean Freedom of Information Act request, where you have an attorney send a letter off to see search warrant that day, even if they.
Well, they showed a orange envelope and said that the warrant was in the envelope after having guns pointed at the children and the mother.
Well, I mean, was it a warrant or was it not? I mean,
You said, was it who?
was there a warrant in the orange envelope?
They never showed anything, just the orange envelope.
So what was in the orange envelope?
They said that it was a warrant envelope, but they never showed the warrant. They just
Did the
held the
person
orange
see
envelope.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out, did the person see the orange? Did they
No.
give the orange? So-
No.
So they just flashed the orange envelope and
Yes.
then they left?
Yeah, no, they did a supposedly raid and they went through the home, but they never showed no documentation of it being solidified as a warrant or them being able to search the house.
I mean, I'll be happy to help that person look into it if you want me to, but generally, you know, it sounds as though arguably that could have been misconduct, but it's, you know, any good attorney has to kind of do their due diligence to really kind of ascertain all the facts first. And that generally is going to require some type of investigation. You know, was there really a warrant in there, or did you have, you know, egregious behavior that should be held accountable as well and prevented them?
Thank you.
That brings up another question. These raids that she's referring to are often engaged in by non-uniformed officers. And the practice has begun where these officers will wear a Halloween mask over their face so that you have no way of identifying them. They don't have on a uniform, they don't have on a badge. You do see a gun and they say police, and all of a sudden they run into your house. Just give me your impression of that.
I think after the fact, even in terms of what I just said a few minutes ago about an attorney doing your due diligence, unfortunately, and you know this, based upon a lot of, you know, conservative, recent, and by recent, I mean the past 20, 30 years, US Supreme Court cases, due to the kind of conservative US Supreme Court we have, officers are given a whole lot of latitude in terms of being able to use all types of what you call coy or deceptive tactics under the guise of, you know, what you hear and abandoned around in political terms, law and order. So given that, and that has kind of eviscerated what some of our individual and constitutional rights are, there's specific case law that would basically say that an officer can wear I mean, they may not specifically reference a Halloween mask, but considering that would involve some type of deceptive or tactic, which has been allowed even in terms of the context of an interrogation, given latitude to do that, that doesn't necessarily make it right. And where an attorney doing their due diligence has to really ascertain facts in that regard is, although you may not be able to tell who that individual officer wearing a Halloween mask is on the time and date in question, once your attorney starts doing their due diligence investigation, then it's incumbent upon your attorney, based upon a FOIA request that I said earlier, maybe even hire a private investigator. My private investigator is a retired Detroit police officer. So I'm saying that to say, you can find out who was wearing a Halloween mask after the fact. You can't necessarily always find out the day of.
Thank you. Any other questions, please? Okay, hearing none, we want to thank Jermaine Wyrick for an outstanding presentation. He's still trying to explain Ohio State.
He knows I graduated from Michigan State. That's why he's saying that. Anyway, thank you, Jermaine. Thank you all for being here. We couldn't do it without you, and we do it for you. Remember, each one teach one. That's why we do this, so that you can carry the message. And we don't expect you to be a lawyer when you leave here. We don't expect your friends or relatives to be your lawyer. What we want you to know is what things like you just heard, what to do when you're in a certain situation. We hear it all the time in Detroit about gun violence. People pull out their weapon because there's a dispute. Know that there is a way to settle your dispute without going to your. That's why we're here, to teach you these things. No more questions. Thank you all for attending. Next week, we got another great program for you. I look forward to you being here. We'll be here. We hope you'll be here. Thank you all.